Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show. I am Shannon Rogers, your host. Welcome to episode 142. I have a guest for you this week, Mark Dubeck from Windwood Milling, who I've just affectionately dubbed the Sarcastic Sawyer because Mark came to my attention because of his Instagram posts. The attention to detail that he pays to the sawing that he does and the cost that goes into the sawing. And he's actually put together some really great Instagram reels that show itemized lists of how much it costs to saw a log and sometimes how much money was lost once he actually sold the wood that came from it. Mark has put a lot out into the interwebs about the day-to-day grind that is being a sawyer and why lumber costs what it does. So I'm happy to welcome to the show, Mark Dubeck. Welcome, Mark, to the show. I appreciate you coming out. Appreciate you navigating the 3-hour time difference because you are in Portland, Oregon, and I am not.
That's right.
I'm on the other side of the country. So those of you who don't know Mark, you really should follow him on Instagram. Mark, what is your Instagram handle? Windwood Milling, at Windwood Milling?
Let's see. I'm pretty sure it's Windwood _LLC.
Yeah, I think you're right. We'll verify that. And
Windwood Milling is the website.
Yeah,
right.
windwoodmilling.com is the website, and I highly recommend you go over there because he's got stuff. He's got stuff for sale. A lot of walnut for sale, too, which I like seeing that. But, Mark, you came to my attention just because of your blatantly honest Instagram reels. Your itemized honest Instagram reels. Here's how much it actually costs to mill a log, and certainly you and I
tend to just put them in posts. Really, I mean, I don't actually, because then I started doing it. People seem to be interested into it, so in it. That's why. I agree. So there you go.
Well, why don't we start at the beginning? How the heck did you get into sawing, and how long have you been doing it?
Right. So I started. I got into, somehow I fell into the Wood Whisperer video podcast back in the day, before all of this social media stuff. And there was Wood Whisperer podcast. And I was like, wow, so you can use hardwood lumber and not the stuff from the big box store. So I was like, wow, this is amazing. So I totally got hooked on that. So that was how I got into woodworking, basically, first.
Okay.
And I got all that set up. I took my garage and turned it into a shop, like any good woodworker does. That's not for cars. No. And then as far as like the whole, morphing to urban lumber, I was seeing some of the Matt Cremona videos coming up here and there. I was like, whatever. I just kind of ignored it for a while. But then at one point, my neighbor here removed a cherry tree, not just a block away. And I was looking at the end grain and I was like, I like cherry. Like, why can't I'm buying cherry at the store? Why can't I just, and then here we are,
nice.
And now, and I have a little part of that, of my bio on my website about that, and just like getting a heavy 4 or 5 foot section of that thing in my Prius across the street, like little, it would have been much easier to just use a hand truck and roll it over, but I didn't know any of that, so the material handling began, and I started trying to cut it up with a Sawzall, and it's just...
Oh my God! Sawzall on a log, dude, nice.
No, and I was cutting the wrong way too. I was trying to cut into the end grain as opposed to going the long way, which would be a lot more efficient. Yeah, all these you'd think. Anyway, I've learned a lot since then.
Yeah.
But I started out chainsaw milling in my front yard. At first I had no chainsaw experience, so I hired a guy named Kevin I found on Nextdoor who had chainsaw experience, had a trailer, had a winch, so he would, I was like, well, look, I've seen Cremona do these videos. I'm going to buy the mill and you're going to chainsaw mill it. So that's how that started. And then I did chainsaw milling in my front yard, and So that's kind
Yeah.
of the quick origin of
Sure.
getting
So
into it.
then
So
today, fast forward to today, what's your equipment set up now?
right. So about 6 months ago, I sold the Alaskan mill.
Mm-hmm.
I had the big, 60-inch bar. I was doing all that. I sold it because the past 2 years I've been hauling logs to Epilogue Sawmill. He's been on the show before,
Yeah. Yeah.
David.
David Barman.
And it's my
Still working
reason
on his
for
book,
it.
too. He was on the show, 2 years ago? The book was about to come out. I just have to
Yeah.
harass him because I know he listens from time to time.
Good.
Waiting on
Yeah.
that book.
Yeah. Yes. We can all harass him. I fully support that. Right. So I've been hauling to him because, he originally floated the idea. It's like, why are you chainsaw milling those logs in your front yard when you could just haul it to me for custom milling? It'll be more efficient, and it probably won't even cost you that more because you're going to have an extra slab per log. And anyways, so at first I was doing that and then hauling the slabs back to my backyard and stacking them. Really, again, just like Cremona, only I didn't have any heavy equipment. I was just doing it on a cart, and it's like with a friend that I pay. It's like so. Eventually, I started stacking the wood there, and he's getting a commission on anything I sell that's air drying there. So that's how that aspect of it works. Plus the custom milling payment or whatever. So that has been, and I've been hauling there because it's really as far as I can tell, one of the more efficient sawmill operations that I've ever seen. That's an urban lumber one, like a small scale, not an industrial, whatever.
Right.
So
Yeah, he's pretty close from an equipment perspective, but taking in just about anything. Whereas the real huge industrial mills are, they're not interested in small jobs.
right.
Interesting. So that actually kind of brings me to a question, because there's a lot of sawyers like you in your area, it seems like. And I don't know whether it's just that's the Instagram algorithm and it keeps showing you, but I've done a lot of digging, and there's a couple of really good retail lumber yards out in your neck of the woods as well. What is that like? Do you find yourself competing with the traditional guys, or is it just, are there so many local urban sawyers because it's just a great environment for, I don't know, is everybody just friends? Like, it blows me away. And I'm asking this because I know a lot of people like you in my neck of the woods in Maryland and Pennsylvania. Everybody's struggling, right? Nobody's making a lot of money in the lumber business, but
Yeah.
a lot of them feeling pressure from the traditional brick and mortar retail yards, whether they're a sawmill or just stacks, and a lot of butting heads, not a lot of friendliness. Maybe that's the East Coast thing versus the West Coast. People are friendlier. I don't know, but what is that
I
atmosphere
grew up.
like?
Well, look, I grew up in Maryland. Okay, so
Okay, yeah,
we were nice there. It wasn't, and I went to school in New York City, so
Okay.
it's okay.
you
So
get it.
I get that, but no, I'm not sure. Right. So is there competition? I think so, some,
Yeah,
but and there are a lot of sawmills here. There really are. I think maybe the competition for good logs, particularly walnut, some. But we're also, I don't know. I've also made a few just posts and friends about sharing resources constantly. It's
Yeah.
like I don't like I said, I only have the trailer. I have the winch. I can haul logs for people. I've done that. I just dropped off a log that I didn't want at Gobi Walnut, and they bought it for a cheaper amount because it had metal and some ring shake. And I was like, I'm going to take the good logs. Do you want this one for cheap? And they're like, yeah. So I dropped it
I'm
off because
surprised they took it. Gobi is like quality.
It was $1 a board foot.
All
$1
right,
a board
fair
foot.
enough.
Big log. 28 by 10 or something. So I made $300, and I dropped that off, and I kept the smaller ones with Heartwood because they had moved to Aurora, where David's sawmill operation is, like really close to there. Anyways, so Yeah, there's competition, and people will, be like, "Well, Gobi does this." I'm like, "Yeah, okay." Or, "Well, Berlin Gray." They don't. I don't find any. I don't know. I feel like I communicate with most of these people, so
That may be it. I mean, I think that's at the heart of it, because when I've had conversations out here and people said, I'm getting pressure from, this company or that company, oftentimes there's no line of communication whatsoever. Now, obviously, it's got to
these
start
places are all
somewhere. And
small, though. That I'm talking about. Like nobody's. I'm not communicating with like Crosscut Hardwoods
I
is
was
like
going to
a
say
larger.
Crosscut is the first one that comes to my mind. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't communicate with it. It's all the smaller ones, like all of these urban lumber operations. I feel like, so.
Do you think that the users, the consumer community, is just more in tune with the urban lumber movement, if you will? I mean,
I think what you bring up a good point, and it's like, I I just surfaced some hickory. The one hickory tree I got out here, I was like, yeah, it's going to be so cool. It's not cool. It's terrible, and it's the quality's not good of it. It's number awful, common, off the charts.
right.
It's not even
So hickory.
for a book.
There's no
But
such
it's
thing as
hickory.
FAS hickory. There's no way.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
No,
Okay, well,
it's
see,
such
I
a
don't.
it's
It's new
such a
to me.
knotty, twisted.
Okay.
Yeah,
But
there's
anyways,
nothing
my
good
point
about it.
is, I'm not going to make money on that. I'd love to break even, but out here, getting Western walnut that's in good shape. I mean, I thought that was what I realized would be a good market for me because yes, there are places that provide it, but the woodworkers I'm meeting and they don't want the Eastern steamed stuff.
Yeah,
They want the real deal,
yeah,
They
sure.
want that colorful stuff that's from here, and everywhere, not just here. Like lots of places want that.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
yeah. I mean, there's no question when you've worked with unsteamed walnut,
Yeah.
it's kind of hard to go back. In saying that, like, it's so funny because the yard where I work, total opposite end of the spectrum here, we've got a lot of walnut, and we really specialize in an extraordinarily high grade. Grades that just don't exist. Superior grade, all air quotes around these things, because nobody, NHLA stops at FAS. But the funny part is some of these superior grades that we're going for, that color, that richness, it's like, if it were unsteamed, it would be a lot easier. Like we could get more of this. Now, there may be not as consistent a color,
Right.
but that kind of deeper chocolate, purple, brown color that just doesn't exist in steamed walnut. And there are people now that are looking for it. And certainly, part of the superior grade is no sap, but there's also that richness of color that is that people are looking for. And I just kind of have to laugh because it's like, it was there, then it was steamed and it kind of got
Right.
dulled out and kind of grayed out.
Yeah.
And now we're sorting through these stacks to find the stuff that like wasn't steamed into submission, in other words, and that's becoming superior grade. I don't know. I mean, some of that is infrastructure. Some of that is there are huge steaming facilities that are just doing their work, and there's no question that it extends the yield of FAS. Well, forgive the pun, the run-of-the-mill, top quality walnut. It certainly does extend the yield. It
I see.
blends that hardwood out quite a bit more. It pulls out some of that crazy color. And in the commercial millwork space where they want it all to look exactly the same, yeah, that makes sense. And again, that's the lion's share of the market. But this kind of underscores what I'm talking about, which I think is fantastic. Let me and my ilk, I'll lump myself in with the big commercial yards. Let us do our thing.
Yeah.
We're not going to play with the unsteamed stuff because we've got this huge demand. I've got a 30,000 linear foot walnut, crown job that I got to run. It's all got to look exactly the same. It's all got to be pretty much riffed to run through the molder really nicely. And the other part of the market, the smaller percent of the market that's looking for character and color and all that stuff,
Yeah.
like let's let the urban guys handle that. It's better utilization of the resource, right? Because some of the stuff that you guys may be cutting down, the steaming mill probably wouldn't take, or at least the volume they wouldn't take. So,
Oh, because of knots and
yeah,
stuff like that,
yeah,
or
and
yeah.
and so and then again, the infrastructure, like where they're getting their folks from, the volume with which they're receiving it, to kind of break that routine, that cycle, would probably be more trouble than it's worth. Yeah, a lot of it, and especially out east, a lot of this is just steeped in tradition. Been buying from this guy. This is how we've been doing it for many, many years. We're not, we're making a profit. Could we do more? Could we do? No, let's just stay the course. And the demand is high enough.
Yeah,
No one really
that's the
needs
thing.
to change. It's
No.
not, and for that matter, the demand is high enough that the price point, we're just talking walnut, is very nice right now. So yeah, why would
Yeah.
I change to find other resources when I'm getting what I'm getting? I can get it FSC and all that fun stuff. So I think that every time I've spoken with a person like yourself, this general theme keeps coming up, that you're not in competition with the big mills. But what I'm interested now is there's a lot of these small guys popping up, and is that competition? I still feel like there's plenty of logs and there's plenty of demand, that if you just get along with your air quotes competition, you guys can share resources and kind of do what you're doing now. So you are hauling logs sometimes sawing logs. And of course what are you doing from a drying perspective?
In the last year or so, Epilogue did buy an iDry kiln. So he bought it so that he could dry. I mean, at this point, I have 20 to 25,000 board feet of lumber there, which for me is a lot. And that's just that was in the last year we saw that. So he bought that. I actually provided a loan for him to build the building for it, and for all the insulation and all that stuff. I was like, we need to get this going. Because I was hauling again, there are a bunch of different places where I can take it around here for kiln drying. There's a place up in Vancouver, AJ with Northwest Wood Creations I would haul. He has an iDry standard. And then I also go to Berlin Grain, who's been on the show a couple times, right? Matt Farrell also knows a lot about wood and kiln drying, so that was a good resource as well. I think I probably started going to them at first. Anyway, so I've always been learning about how to. Probably one of the more important things, if anyone's listening, is not just where do you take it to kiln dry, but how do you stack it so that you're bringing something that fits the kiln right when you get there, and it's banded or it's strapped so that all they have to do is pick it up, take it off your trailer, and put it in. My first forays, I think I went to Caster's Custom Cutting down in Malino, and I just had a bunch of slabs in the back of my neighbor's van, and they didn't charge me extra, but they're like, all right, let's get a pallet. Okay.
Right. They probably should have, though. Yeah.
Right.
Well, good for them.
Yeah. They had a minimum charge of whatever, how many board feet, but they're like, okay, guy,
Yeah.
So just that aspect is important, and just bringing things anywhere, whether I'm going to surface stuff, how is it stacked? Is it banded? Can they pick it up with a forklift? Does the trailer fenders go up too high for them to even pick up this stupid thing? Just all these things I've learned.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's kind of fascinating, though, because I've spoken to and swapped emails with hundreds and hundreds of people who want to get into this, and many of them have, there's a lot of resources out there, and they put a lot of thought into this, and they've secured the financial stuff, and they've got this list of
but
things
not
that
into
they have
the stuff I just said. Not in.
What do you mean?
They put their thoughts into how to saw it, the sawmill part, the exciting part. But the not exciting part is how to move the stuff around. How is it efficient? How is it dried?
Yeah.
How is it, all that boring stuff that.
Well, but all of them understand, I've got to have some way to saw it, and generally a lot of folks are like, well, I can have this, this kind of band mill, but then I can also have an Alaskan mill, or I can have a Lucas mill if I've got really, really big stuff. and it's like, okay, that's the sexy part, right? As far as this goes. And a lot of them understand, okay, well, I've looked into eye-drying kilns, I've looked into this kiln or whatever. But I also don't think you have to, like, you don't have to show up on day one and have all the gear. I run into this with woodworking as well. It's like, all right, I'm going to get into woodworking. Give me a list of the 25 tools you have to buy. And I'm like, dude, slow down.
25, yeah.
Go buy a saw, go buy a plane.
3, 4,
and then spend the rest of your money on wood, because you're going to be shocked when you start to realize how expensive this stuff is. But there's these like itemized lists, and no one, like you just said, no one is thinking about, how do I move the log? And then, we'll credit where credit's due to Matt Cremona, just because of his exposure and the whole log arch idea that he built. Yeah. You got a lot of people who are now they're thinking about this. But so you got it from the curb or the yard onto your trailer. How are you going to get it
That's a big step. That's good if you've done that, by the way.
And then but then the other aspect is like, well, is your trailer going to stand up to this? Like, do you really understand how heavy a log is? And you just went to Tractor Supply and bought a trailer, and that poor trailer, it's not going to last you a season or whatever. But the constant, like the incredible volume of labor to saw a log into boards, not only in, let's just forget about things like quarter sawing where you're having to rotate the log, that sucks. Through sawing, certainly, but there's a lot of shimming, there's a lot of moving stuff around, there's securing it in place, and then there's just moving those big ass 10 quarter slabs or maybe 8 quarter slabs off to some other place. And you may just like, okay, well, I'm going to pull it off onto the pallet here. Well, is that pallet where you're going to dry it? No. So then you're going to have to move them from that pallet to somewhere else. And that somewhere else is probably something to transport it to somewhere else. And then you're going to move it from the transport to the pile.
And if anything, this is partly why I've been hauling to Epilogue for, and I don't think I could get it any better than what's happening right now, because it's all right there. It comes off the sawmill on a roller table. We determine if there's defects that need to go to the edger. We do that, take the pith off, get it out, put it back here, stack it in the shape and size of the kiln. Is it an 8-foot unit? Is it a 12? And then it's done. It's banded, and then you pick it up and put it over there with a label. And then when it's time to dry, it's picked up. No more stacking, restacking, all that crap. That, like you're saying, like, if you have massive slabs coming off your sawmill, then what? It's like, all right, and then people are like, oh, then you flip it and do this. What? No, just like scrape the sawdust off and stack it and
Well, and you forget, like, okay, say, I'll translate this to like, molder production. So I've got to run, 30,000 linear feet of crown.
Right.
Well, if I don't set that profile right, or I don't, if I don't have the machine that's got 6 heads and I've got to do multiple
or in and out feed setup, everything. Yeah.
If I've got to make 2 passes, I now don't have 30,000 linear feet of crown. I have 60,000 linear feet of crown to run.
Right.
And if I have to go from the outfeed to the infeed, and I don't have a way to transport 30,000 linear feet 10 feet
on a cart or
what? Now like, I'm hand unstacking and restacking, and that's there's a finite amount of time that it takes to move that many boards or that amount of poundage. We run into this a lot in our finishing room where, multiple passes, this is a 2-coat process or a 3-pass process because it's a sanding coat in between. So obviously we put our sander in line, so it's still 2 passes, but still like it still takes 30, 45, well, I'd say an hour to run this 1,000 linear feet 1 pass. If I got to do it twice, it's going to take at least 2 hours, and there's only 8 hours in the working day, and I've got 17 jobs to do. It's just not possible to do this. The sheer volume of moving stuff, unstacking and stacking, and okay, like you say, we got to flip it. Well, you got to flip every board, and every board weighs 20, 30, 60 pounds. And it's like,
you need 2 humans in some case. Right. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And actually this segues to where I take most following the kiln dry process, where I take most of it to either hit and miss lumber, or if I do have slabs, I want to surface a little more. Maybe I go usually to Creative Woodworking downtown, or it's not downtown, Southeast Portland. They have a massive industrial operation. Well, massive to me, it's actually not that massive. They have a fantastic facility for people like me or any. They have. Anyway, it's like you're saying, it's very efficient. They have multiple forklifts. They have multiple planer sanders, a planer. They have, a 20-inch jointer for those wacky boards. It's just, it's efficient. I can get over 1,000 board feet hit and missed in, an hour to hour and a half charge. Like, it's fantastic.
I think there's a real key takeaway to just all of this conversation so far is like you don't have to do it all yourself.
I don't.
Probably shouldn't. And to get to the point where you're doing it from log to kiln dried sellable boards, there's so many steps along the way. So you could do it yourself, but you have to be content with your scale. If you want to scale up or down, it changes the game entirely. And there's a lot of folks who are just not thinking about that. And maybe they have milled 1 or 2 logs and, it was still like exciting and fun and think of all the stuff I'm going to do with this. Now, when you start milling logs that you aren't necessarily going to build something with, because there's always that personal attachment. I'm milling this log and I'm already thinking about how I'm going to use it in a case or something like that. And that's part of that creative process. When you're milling a board just for yield, for board footage and quality and grade, maybe, it's not as much fun. Let's just put it that way. The disconnect from what the final
product. It's
exciting
when those sweet boards come off the mill and you're like, oh, those are going to be nice,
Yeah, right.
Then it's, it's, I agree. Yes, it's not the same.
So moving that slab 4 times that you were previously okay with moving that slab 4 times.
No,
you're not okay moving it 4 times now because, it doesn't work that way.
I'm at a place now where I'm never okay moving it 4 times.
Do that long enough, and you won't be walking.
No, not even if it's for me. No, I want to move it once and then one more time for me.
So I'm curious. You've like I said initially, you've done some great posts where you've itemized everything that went into jobs. So I don't need you to throw actual numbers out here, but tell me about the job. That's fine. Tell me about the job in which you lost the most money.
Okay. Well, I thought about this, and I don't have like, which one was I lost thousands and thousands. I mean, yes, all of them. There's too many to list, really. Sure. There are too many to list because there's so many ways to mess up. So I'll just choose a recent one. Okay. One of the many.
It wasn't hard to find one. Yeah.
No, not at all. The one where I made the money, which I know is a question coming up, was a harder one. But okay, so a recent one, getting walnut logs from a retired tree person. What do they call arborists? They look decent, and I saw one of them had some screws on the sides. Of course, in Oregon, walnut is not native, so it's always going to be, a yard tree, basically.
Yeah.
I guess you could. Anyway, I saw some screws on that one. I was like, okay, let's leave that one. I don't want that one. Fine. And then it turned out that whole amount of logs I got from him, it was like 900 board feet. And again, I was getting a good price, drove 2 hours there and back. It was just a treehouse tree, and I lost not just the $900 he got from me, but the hours that David spent trying to get something out of it, eventually, giving up, saying, you know what, there's nails every foot. It's not like, there's nails in the chest high section, at chest height, so let's pull those out and then get back to work. So I lost multiple hours of custom milling time, money, and then also all the blades he went through. After 10, he said, screw this. No.
Yeah, we're
So
done.
that was 400, and then there was all the hours he spent on those. So, and then I was like, okay, I'm gonna take these and try to monetize a few bowl blanks. Again, still not worth it
Yeah.
because I think in addition to there being nails, you can't even get a blank without nails or screws. It was not figured. There was plenty of
Mm.
defects. I mean, I was just thinking at the time, oh, walnut logs, dollar board foot, saw log length,
Yeah.
sign me up. And then
Right.
one of them, I noticed getting back in the yard, there's a 2x4 growing out of it. Or
Cool.
embedded, yeah. So basically, yeah, shame
Yeah.
on me. I should have looked more carefully.
Yeah.
I mean,
But
but
you obviously had no idea that this was a treehouse tree, right? The tree had been felled. In other words, you were looking at
this
log
had
on
been
the
around
ground.
for a while. Yeah, no,
Okay.
it
Yeah.
wasn't. Yeah, no. In fact, it was at a yard of a person that I've gotten great things from that he
Hmm.
recently started renting from. And I was like, hey, there's walnut logs, and you know, I thought I was getting a good deal, and turns out he was getting a great deal
Yeah.
for unloading these things. He must have known that it was,
Huh.
clearly a treehouse tree.
Sure.
But that's just one of the many ways I've lost money. I had wood that was not dry that I sold to people. I had to go around and collect the boards I sold that I thought were dry, but I didn't check carefully, and we're still at 30% moisture. And I was like, so I
Mm,
lost a few grand on that. And
that's
by the way,
fun.
there was time spent. Who counts that? So anyway,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. It's funny when you're on your own business how you don't pay attention to your time, and everyone talks about time is money, but yeah, well, it doesn't work that way. So, not that I want to be, like focus on negative here, but I talk to any sawyer, and they're going to be like exactly like you. Oh, I got plenty of jobs I can talk about where I lost money on. This went
oh,
wrong,
okay.
this went wrong, and
I could
generally
think of
it's
so
a
many.
yeah, it's usually just the stuff that's in that log that you're not aware of. The other one I hear a lot is like you opened it up and it just wasn't anything in there. Like there was nothing, whether it was
Which is
riddled with
fine if you
defects
have
or
very little into it and you're
yeah,
willing and you're ready to throw it away before you put any more time and money into it.
yeah,
That
yeah, that's
is
true.
important. No, don't. That was the other thing I've learned is don't bother kiln drying anything that looks awful because you can't sell it. No,
Yeah,
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 it's like
and
someone's gonna want it. No, they will not.
I guess that's the one side of things. Like when you are doing it all yourself, well, it's a catch-22. I was going to say you can walk away a little bit easier without having so much invested into it, and you can decide this is firewood when I'm a little bit into
Yes.
it. But the catch-22 to this is when you are at that scale, that like I'm cutting boards for my own use. You tend to be in that hoarder stage still, where everything has value, everything is great. You're not walking away from anything, and then you're stacking and stickering stuff that you're probably never going to use because it's just not interesting, or it's
I'm
it looks like
past that
butternut
stage.
because it's all sapwood.
I'm past it. No, but like, okay, fine. Like, you have a board that comes off the sawmill that only has a 2 inch, and let's say it's walnut. Like,
Yeah,
just save that 2 inch piece. Throw away the holes, the
yeah,
pith, the rot, the bugs. Just
right.
throw it away. Get it out because it's going to be any more time and money I spent on that stuff has been wasted 2, 3 times in a row. And
Yeah.
it's not. Ugh,
Well, and
done.
speaking of our earlier conversation about moving stuff, think about the number of
Yeah,
times
same
you'll
thing.
move that lumber out of the way to get to the stuff you
Yeah.
want over the next decade. I often, I mean, this is on a totally different scale, but I remember when I got into wood turning, I started like a lot of people making pins. And, I was already doing, regular casework type woodworking, but I had started making pins and I was like, okay, well, now suddenly a 3/4 by 3/4 by 6 inch long blank has use. Oh my God. Like I would save everything. You get that skinny rip off the table saw and it's like, I'm like chopping it up into 6 inch blanks and throwing it in my pin blank drawer. And it's like, turn a pin out of like straight grained walnut. And it's so boring. Like over a 3-inch barrel, 2 3-inch barrels with a ferrule in the middle. It's the most boring pin ever. The smaller the piece, like you said with bowl blanks, the smaller the piece, usually the more figure there needs to be. And certainly there is beauty in straight grain, but like I kept so much maple because it had a hint of curl. And you put it on the lathe and it's like, where's the curl? Like, it's so boring. It's just a white pin, nobody wants that. I threw out eventually, probably like 2 years into it, I threw out,
Yeah.
hundreds of pounds of pin blanks. It was just,
It's okay. Yeah. I put it on the curb, and I think that's what's changed for me. It's like, as a business thing, it's like, okay, is that a nice 12-inch blank for the people I send? I have a wholesale blank buyer that I send things to in Utah. So, but again, it's got to be freaking exceptional, not boring. No, it's got to be figured, free of defects, and fantastic.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
they buy it in bulk. I put it on a pallet. It goes away. And the things that are okay, whatever, my neighbors freaking love it.
Yeah. Hey,
I
there you
just put
go.
it on the curb. And it's
Neighborhood
free
harmony.
usually. So what am I going to do with it? I don't. Yeah.
Yeah.
They take it away.
So let's look at the converse of this. Let's talk about the job that you did the best on. You made the most money
Okay.
out of it.
Sure.
That one job.
I mean, one, right? There's been a few. And I don't, again, I didn't keep numbers, but I was thinking back. I was like, okay. And then the other thing is, some of them are still to come, to be honest, because they're air drying. But there's a common thread for me, and actually, I want to say it's because I sort of just got lucky with good material, really.
Okay.
Like, one that comes to mind is I got three large American elm logs from a tree that was removed up in, it was like Battleground or whatever. People I knew were like, hey, do you want some of this one? We're going to keep this one, and I'll eat this one. It's like, it was just a really good specimen for live edge slab book matches. They were really good for that.
Nice.
No significant, defects. I mean, I think the butt log was clear for 10 feet. So that's the other thing with people with slabs, even with slabs, not just lumber. People like buying things that are ready to work with, not full of. I mean, like, it was pretty. There was some figure here. There was crotch wood on the second log, and I actually made a dining table for a client that's used me a few times. So that was, rewarding both monetarily, but also, just like, it was nice to do some woodworking.
Yeah.
And I saw
See it
all
turn into
these
something.
book matches actually sell for, I'm not making like billions of dollars, but it felt like, okay, that is something worth doing. Like,
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
like, I hauled them out, I parbuckled them onto the trailer, 2 in one trip, 1 in another, all the way from Battleground down to Epilogue. He sawed them on the sawmill. They kiln dried, and they sold for money, like $1,400 a set, and there were so many sets because they were all really high quality. And I honestly feel with that job, or I got some super curly walnut logs that I wasn't quite aware how fantastic they were going to be. I got them from another sawmill, and he sold them to me because he was selling a bunch of other stuff, and he didn't really want to unload them because he knew that they were really nice, but he needed the money. And I wasn't like taking advantage of him. I gave him a little more than he originally asked. I was like, hey, I'm going to scale these. Like, I'm not going to just take the smallest end and make that. It was like maybe 20 on one end, but it was mostly 24 inch. So I was like, look, I'm going to make this 24 inch by 2 a board foot, and paid him. But man, I should have paid him a little more. But then again, it's like, this is like one of the very few wins, And anyway, that's coming up soon. If people,
Very nice.
No, but it's clear and curly, and I know that I can unload, So,
Well, but the
anyway.
key there is the end of this transaction, if you will, actually selling the boards. Like, and I
Right.
see all day long, like, oh, look at this great thing that was, this beautiful slab, this beautiful board. This log really netted so much more than I thought. And it's like, okay,
Right.
did you turn it? Like, have you moved the inventory yet?
I think if it nets though, that's a good point. Also, like that
Yeah, I
hickory
guess,
tree did not
it's
it
a
net like
win,
half
certainly.
of what I thought.
But like I'll walk into yards, traditional retail lumber yards, but then also the small mill yard, aka the guy's garage, with stuff stacked along the wall or whatever. Yeah, and you'll look at some of the stock, and some of the stock has been there a long time.
Ugh, drives me nuts.
I mean,
Yeah.
what's your turn rate like? Do you have any idea?
I start going crazy around a year.
Okay, that's pretty good though. I've seen
I
folks
get
with
for
decade-old
slabs.
material. Yeah.
Oh, forget it. No, no thanks. I've had the LLC for 4 years, and I've been selling for maybe 5, let's say.
Okay.
So that's still not even possible for a decade. Yeah, no, but the lumber it goes better than that, and the money ends up being relatively the same. I mean, after the costs and all this stuff with slabs, unless again, unless it's fantastic, and fantastically worth it. I have an elm log that I got that I was going to do book match sets with, but it was another terrible idea. So I'm going to cut that thing up, and no,
Right.
I know it's not going to sell. So.
Understandable. So we've looked at both sides of the coin here. What can you say these jobs have taught you? Like, some of it's luck, right? Some of it is bad luck. You don't know what's in that log until you start sawing it.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, for somebody who says, I want to live your life, what are the advice? Like, what have you learned from these things that can kind of guide people?
Don't do it.
Yeah.
I want to
Yeah.
live your life.
What?
No, don't do it. But okay, if you must, if you must. I mean, I think we were discussing something about this topic earlier, but I think I'll just repeat. It's like when those winds come in. Yes, mill it, stack it, get that yield, get the best thing you can out of it. But with things that are not as you hoped they would be,
Right.
I think letting them. Gosh, it makes me think of like stock trading or something. Focus on not losing money. Get rid of that thing that's losing you money and putting your time and effort into something that's worth it.
Yeah,
It's
kind of like what you've decided to do just by outsourcing some of this work. Like, this is a
let the
money suck
winners
for me.
do their job. Let
That's
the
a good
winners
point.
run, and focus on not hanging on to something that's not going to do anything for you. It's better to liquidate. Like I have so many things. I have some white oak that I was like, oh, it's an eastern white oak in Oregon, sweet, and it's full of knots. So it's number one common. Thankfully, it's not worse than that. But locally, here's what what you talked about earlier. Locally, I know Hereford Hardwood sells the white oak 8-quarter for the number one common was like 5 a board foot. I was like, great. So I have 6-quarter number one common that I have 3 to 4 a board foot into it just to get it dry, and I'm selling it for that basically.
Yeah.
So, and I'm happy for it to leave. That's the difference. I'm not trying to eke something out of it by like, I don't know, turning it into butcher block or something. I feel like that's you know what I mean? Like I want it out so I can have space and time for something that people actually continue to want.
That's actually a really good point, because in my head I was thinking, well, you've got some of this stuff, and yeah, it's riven with things, but maybe you can cut it up into pool cue blanks or something like that.
You can?
Yeah, you can. There's all kinds of transformation you can do to find a market.
And
so
grading
that
cutting
is a
boards
possibility, but
is perfect for that stuff.
getting too precious about some of this stuff if it's a dog, it's a dog, and maybe getting rid of it for somebody that, like your analogy is good, who is already a winner at cutting boards, already has that established business or something like that, has some sort of efficiency built into their shop to quickly process.
And they will. They'll
Yeah.
buy it, but it has to be really cheap, and I'm not going to make money. That's the point. And
Yeah.
it's number one common. Someone did buy the majority of everything except those 2 quarter-sawn boards because they don't like the Rayflag, blah blah blah, which you've talked about on your episodes enough. Anyway, but he took it all away. He took 8, 9 boards. They were like $25 to $30 each, and I didn't feel like crying about it. I was very happy. I was like, that's that, but I'm not going to get any more for it, and it's just like a lesson. Like, why would somebody show up and buy, pay any more than they would here, then they could get it elsewhere, and it's because it's the same thing and it's worse than at the store. Yeah. It's worse, not better.
You've got all this work input into it, so therefore it's special, and yours must be better. And no, it's not. It's the same.
The walnut is. Some of it is really nice.
But that's to your point of the find the winners.
The figured maple.
Yeah.
Or the stuff that's like, wow, that's fantastic. Or myrtle. Or stuff. It's just like, yeah. So.
Yeah. Oregon myrtle. More of that. I love that stuff.
I wish, dude. I have plenty. No one's buying it.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
20-inch boards.
I wonder if it's just not well known or something. I don't know. I mean, it's certainly not one of the mainstream species. So I guess that's an interesting point. Like, I look at your website here.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, look, myrtle.
There's some myrtle.
Hey, look at that, worked out well. But there's a lot of really beautiful stuff floating on here. But
the stuff toward the bottom's been there almost a year.
Really?
Yeah, that's why they're on sale.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
But, I've certainly have seen you've sawn a lot of walnut. You've been seeking out walnut logs and things like that. What kind of trends are you seeing in your local market from a species perspective and from a kind of dimension perspective? Are the slabs still moving? Is it tied to a species? What are you seeing?
Right. Oh, as far as market trends, I wanted to say I'm not, I wanted to say I can't give you that. It's like how I feel like I've changed into doing more dimensional, mostly because I feel like it's I don't know if that's a trend that's local or national or whatever. It's like my trend. I don't know how to describe that. So there are still people looking for slabs. Definitely. Like these Myrtle book matches, there's been zero interest, like zero interest, and they don't have live edge, so maybe that's part of the issue. I mean, they're nice, wide, mostly clean for Myrtle boards.
Sure.
Anyway, there are people looking for slabs. I sell them. It's slow. They don't sell for as much as I'd hoped. Whereas the lumber, I found dimensional walnut. I have curly maple here and there. I have a few quilted boards of maple. They sell for what I anticipated, whereas the slabs sit around and I start going crazy, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, that actually plays with kind of a nationwide trend. I think you had said it earlier, people like stuff that's kind of ready to work.
Yes.
And there's no question you can get narrower boards from a slab. Like Matt Cremona just did a thing at Woodworking America about like composing furniture from this. But I also don't think I think the woodworker that is composing a piece of furniture and all that grain, I think, is in the minority. There's still a lot of woodworkers.
It's an expensive way to do it. That's the problem.
There's no question. And there's
if you have the material, sure, that's a cool use.
Yeah.
I think that's fantastic. But if you're looking to make a piece of furniture, I mean, actually, you probably know better than me. Like, that's not how you'd go about sourcing stuff right? No.
I mean, generally there's like a component of that piece that I'm building that is like super important, and I want to make a statement with that.
Sure.
But the rest of the material is supposed to fade into the background, right? Like, the panels on the door, that's your really cool wood. Your rails and stiles are rift.
Right.
You want it to fade into the background. And I often find myself designing my pieces based upon what I have on hand. Like,
it's fun.
I'm building a box, and it's like, well, could it be this tall or could it be a little bit taller? Well, I happen to have a Sapele board that's already this wide, so the box is going to be that wide, because then I don't have to rip that board down. And I work by hand, so ripping is not just as simple as flipping on a table saw and ripping it down to size. So those efficiencies, I think, happen quite a bit in most.
But you have a planer.
I do. Yeah, it's over my shoulder right there.
That's right. Okay.
And I don't have to prove to anybody that I know how to hand plane a board. That's fine.
No, I know. Yeah, right.
I see day in and day out. I'm not in a retail yard, but I sell to retail yards all the time. I also get plenty of phone calls from people who want to buy from a retail perspective from me. And I bought lumber as a retail consumer for 20 years now.
Mm-hmm.
You tend to want that board that's going to be relatively easy to process. And a slab is cool. It's amazing. It's big. More than anything, but sometimes being able to forgive the bad pun, see the forest through the trees, like how do I get my parts out of that? I'd much rather just go buy a square, an S4S board, or if not S4S, at least straight line ripped or something like that, because I know what to do with that. I don't have to snap a chalk line. I don't need a straight edge track saw to process that.
And then resaw the 2.5 inch thing, and and then hope it doesn't bow, and
it will bow. There's not a question. It's going to happen. So
I know that's like
it's going to happen. But there's a lot of people in various stages of their woodworking career that they don't know that. They don't understand that. And they immediately get it bowed and went crazy, and then they turn around and say, "You sold me bad wood." I love that expression. It's bad wood. It's like, when you call it bad wood, you
got to do it when it's
God,
wet,
right?
It's
God grew it. It's not bad wood, Well, it's dried improperly. And yes, there are instances of people who do not dry things well, but that's a very small percentage. Drying is not an unknown science. It is a science, but there are kiln schedules that are readily downloadable.
And you have plenty of episodes on the topic where people can listen if they want to.
Absolutely. Yeah. So last thing on this.
I've listened.
Well, I appreciate that.
I listened to the episodes. Okay.
The last thing from a sawing perspective is waste and yield. And there's twofold to this. Are you able to get, when you look at a log, are you able, you're scaling it, to get an idea, a forecast of kind of what kind of footage you would get out of that log, and whether or not you're accurate or not? Is that a matter of your own skill, or like how? What am I trying to ask here? How accurate do you find scaling the log is down to actual footage?
Actually, not bad. I think because whether I'm using Doyle or Scribner scale or whatever, when I'm looking at the log, for people that aren't familiar, because I certainly wasn't as a woodworker, how this stuff works. You take the smaller end of the log, not the bigger end, because you're going to have a wedge cut first. And then if I have that diameter, even with sap, no bark, we're actually yielding a little better than Doyle or Scribner scale. Now, that goes out the window when there's a massive amount of rot or whatever. But as far as like that goes, that has been okay. And I've been, if I'm buying, let's say, walnut logs for whatever, anywhere between $1 to $2 a board foot, if I'm lucky, out here, that's what ends up in the unit, and as far as waste, I don't know. I feel like a rather accomplished sawyer to do that, and when I can, I like being there to provide labor, not just because I'm making the process more efficient and saving some money, but I like being there, and turning that thing into lumber is enjoyable.
That is still the fun part.
But as far as the yield goes, yeah, it goes out the window when there's extra defects, or maybe you got, again, like getting all the walnut logs, put them all on my trailer. I get a better deal than just, I want that one and that one, so you get one, for example, that has the heart is going, like a diagonal through the damn thing, and those boards, it's like, you take something that would have been, I don't know, 15 board feet, let's say, and then it becomes 3, because I don't want that heart anywhere in those boards. Like, I don't want the pith going like sideways. It's great if it's straight, because then you get 2/4 saw boards, right? If you're cant sawing something, that's fine. 4-inch wide walnut boards, who doesn't want those? That's fine. We're not dealing with, I guess if I'm dealing with a different species, it gets more complicated, right? Like if you're, you've had episodes of hickory. I don't know what everyone will do with that thing. I'll keep it for myself. Make pens, right?
Exactly. Talk about boring pens.
But with that was the other thing with walnut. Those 3-inch wide boards, they'll be cheaper than the stuff that is FAS, but people want that, and what they don't want is they don't want a $15 or $20 walnut board that's 8 feet by 10 feet, or 10 inches wide, with the pith going 2 inches on one end over here, and then on the other side of the board that way. Like, they don't want that. What they want is the short on this side and the short on the other side of the heart.
Yeah.
I much rather spend the time, cut that out, lose 5-10 board feet or whatever. So I don't know. I think the yield is actually, matching what I'm paying for the logs, as well as ending up in the unit. And then any of the waste just goes, forget it, go away. It's not worth it.
That's a point that I want to touch on, because it's another one of those kind of unthought of things. We talked about all the moving stuff back and forth, but obviously sawing logs produces a lot of waste. A lot of waste that is highly flammable. That also generates an exothermic reaction as you put it in a pile and it like decomposes and such. And I bring this up because we recently had a terrible disaster here in Baltimore where Camp Small, our local urban forestry place, caught on fire and gone. Now their equipment, everything is good. I've spoken with Sean, and they should be up and running again as soon as they get the all clear from the fire department, get the power turned back on. But this was a situation where, this was an urban log drop for the city, and kind of hemmed in on all sides by trees. And as they started sawing, there's just no place to put their piles of waste. And in I'm trying to say this and not offend people, because it's not my intention, but in a like proper industrial sawmill, we have very efficient ways of dealing with all of our sawdust. We have whole sections of the yard with like a fire break around it, so that if for some reason, that decomposing pile does catch fire, it'll just burn and it won't catch everything else around it. We get inspected for all that stuff, because it's a massive problem. Moreover, you constantly have to be moving it out of there because you're just constantly generating more. So I've been to a couple of small, one-man operations, and they just have these enormous piles of waste. And I'm just like, dude, you're going to burn your house to the ground.
I know. It's terrible.
And not to mention,
again,
bugs and all kinds of other stuff.
Again, this is why I'm hauling. I hope people, maybe everyone will support Epilogue Sawmill after this. This is why I have this relationship, is because there is an efficient way. All the top, jacket cuts go onto these roller tables, and this direction, it goes there, it gets banded. Once that thing's full, there's a separate bin for the offcut pieces. For the edger pieces, there's a separate spot, and that gets banded, goes to the burn pile. The sawdust is far from, he's got hooked up the dust collection. It goes there. There's a separate sawdust hopper that gets emptied when that thing's full. And so nothing is
it's a whole infrastructure in itself.
Nothing is strewn about near the air drying wood. ideally that where the money is, or the asset is, right? The actual asset,
Right.
as opposed to the waste pile is in a separate spot. So yeah.
That's the only other thing that I'm going to just start hammering on. And the only reason I bring up Camp Small, it's not like they were doing it poorly. They just inherited a lot of stuff and they've been getting there. But yeah, I anticipate we will see more lumberyard fires with more of the smaller mills that aren't quite aware, or maybe they have land and they're just able to like bulldoze it off into a corner. But yeah, it's incredibly dangerous stuff. Much not to mention there is a whole economy for a lot of that stuff. I've had a wood fiber insulation guy on the show before. There is, for those that generate a lot of that, like wood pellet manufacturers, we're selling multiple
Firewood
tractor trailer loads of dust daily out of my
good.
yard for those pellet guys. And then of course we're powering our kilns with our dust as well. But there's huge piles of crap generated every time you saw a log, and that stuff isn't just not making you any money, but it's actually dangerous. It's the bugs are still in it. It's generating heat. It's all kinds of vermin in there as well. So yeah, it's just something to be aware of there. So
I agree.
So let's wrap this up by you just recently announced that you're going out of business. I don't know how you want to put that. You're going to stop sawing in like a year and a half or something like that. Tell me about this decision. Let's get it all clear. You still have wood, but tell me about this decision to stop sawing.
Right. So I'm not going to stop sawing in a year and a half. I'm going to stop milling. Well, there's still 1,000 board feet of walnut logs to get through, and then there's 7,000 or 8,000 board feet of maple, like figured maple that David and I are supposed to be going into together, and we'll figure that out. But yes, no, I've decided. So after that, I am going to stop getting new logs. Like currently, I've already said to the couple people, I've got 3 or 4 messages already. Do you want to buy these walnut logs? I'm like, nope, done.
Yeah.
I am, and then a few arborist contacts. I'm just saying, hey, I'm not taking in anymore. Like I'm done.
So as of now, or in time, you'll stop taking logs?
As taking off, no more logs now.
Okay.
And just for some perspective, like I said, there are currently 7,000 board feet of logs to get through at the sawmill. And there's around 20,000 board feet of wood that is air drying, at least 5,000 or 6,000 that's ready to kiln dry right now. And there's probably 3,000, 4,000 board feet in the room that I do sales out of, ready to sell also.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going to be happening between now and when I'm ready to close.
Sure.
But yeah, but that's another thing about the process of how long it takes to have material be ready. It's it's a year, 2 years, depending on the thickness. So
well, and I think you actually made a point. It was probably on Instagram, but it's not a matter of I'm going to stop taking the money I make and pouring it back into the business because of all the equipment and all the stuff that on the buying of logs and moving the logs and all that stuff.
Sure.
Any boards you are selling now, that money is going right back in because of just the sheer cost and stuff that goes into buying logs and moving logs and all that stuff around. So you've built up an inventory, and you've always wanted to sell that inventory. We'll continue to sell the inventory, but instead of that profit from it turning around and going right back into buying more inventory, that's a good move. And actually, I think it's probably a natural step in any sawmill. At some point, you have to stop buying because you've got this, call it near inventory or to be sawn, not yet inventory, but it is still inventory. As far as the bank is concerned, it's an asset, right? So it's interesting. Right. So what do you think? What's your timeline like? How long do you think it'll take you to saw all the logs that you currently have? And if you had them all sawn, you wouldn't have a place to put the boards, I would assume. with that amount of
Oh no,
material?
I do. No, they're all because I have that relationship at Epilogue. I have no. There's plenty of air dry space if that's what you
Oh,
mean.
okay, great.
Oh, do you mean when they're dry to sell? Is that what you mean?
Well, I mean, a little bit of both because it's like you said, it's not like you buy a log, saw it, and it's ready to sell. So you've got,
Right. Has to air
you've
dry
got
and then.
the physical logs. When you saw it, obviously, if it's in a perfect world, you can stack it in a nice boule, and it takes up kind of sort of the same space the log took up. Add the stickers into it, but you still have, you know, that stuff's got to be dried, and then once it's kiln dried, like you've got to put it in a showroom. I mean, there's a lot of material
Right.
at play here. If your turn rate is, in a good world, a couple of months, 3 months, you still, everything you sell, you can immediately put another one right back in its place for probably some time. Have you thought about
Right.
what that lifespan looks like? And honestly, the really scary question of what's next after that.
Yeah, I mean, what's next after that is too far in the future for me. Um, but I mean, I think more in the short term, we can get through all those logs. I mean, we can do the walnut logs in a day or two, and then the maple will take a little longer, and then, I mean, honestly, I have space now for another 6/4 unit, so I just tell David, time for another 6/4 unit. Put it in there when your white oak is done, and
Nice.
then that comes out at the end of January, and then you know, get people to buy it, hopefully, and then you know, just the other week I sold some 6/4 to people, and like, oh, now there's a little more space on that wall. Time to do that,
That's great.
and what was the earlier part of it? Yeah, I made the decision because I don't want to do sawmilling full time,
Mm-hmm.
and I never did, and as far as the business grew. It escalated particularly during the pandemic because I didn't have my orchestra job, so this was felt full time, and I guess I'm at a point where both my body and my mind are ready to not be doing it as a full, like, feels like a full time sawmill business, and to do it. I don't know what's next. That honestly, a year and a half, it's like a lot can change in a
Yeah.
year and a half. I know that I don't want to take more logs in though now, and I want to sell what I have, and I do have a plan for some for the family. I have someone I'm asking to make some bedroom set furniture. I could do some things myself, but I'll probably procrastinate and not do it. So I'll make some things, but he's going to do some stuff. So that's nice to put that money back into happy family life. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not a bad idea.
No, not a bad
But
idea at
there'll be
all.
money left over, and I frankly, instead of making, I think this year I'll make $5,000 or something stupid, five or ten maybe. I'll have like real money left over in a year, and then a year after that, so I'll like have to pay real tax. Like, it's weird. I
Yeah.
haven't done that before. Yeah, it just
That's no
yeah
fun. Yeah.
yeah. So or anyway,
Well, I think
I'll
it's
be able
interesting
to have it. Yeah.
because there's so much talk of scaling this up, and I run into this a lot with the hand tool school. I constantly have people who are like, if you did this or this, you could blow this up, and I'm like, I am like perfectly content with the size of my business as it is. I don't want to
Right.
hire people. I don't want to
Right.
build a
That would
bigger
be the next step.
space.
Yeah.
And that is the next step. If I wanted to grow more, then I would need these additional things. I would need to outsource some of this other stuff. And there's a point
Yes.
where I'm perfectly happy being a small business, being a single business person without employees, and
Right.
having an exit strategy over the the long term of things. I think that's really cool. But you brought it up, so I have to hit on
Oh,
this. You have
okay.
another job. You play for an
Yeah.
orchestra, Portland Symphony.
It's
Very
Oregon
nice.
Symphony. We are
Oregon
in
Symphony.
Portland. Yeah.
Okay,
They were called the Portland Symphony a longer time ago.
I
Anyway,
thought
so
so.
Oregon Symphony now.
Who's your
Yeah.
principal conductor?
Right now it is David Donsmeyer. Previously we had Carlos Kalmer since
Okay,
I've been here.
Calmer. I know. I don't know Donsmeyer. Okay.
He's been here I don't remember how many years. Oh, he started right at the pandemic, and then we all Zoomed for a
very
while
nice.
and
Very
discussed
nice.
what we were going to do until we, yeah.
So you play the clarinet. Are you
Right.
what are you like first chair? What are you, principal
This year I
clarinetist?
am actually. I'm
Very
filling
nice.
in because but usually I play second and E flat clarinet. For the
Very
people who
nice.
don't know, that's the piccolo version of the clarinet. That and second, and then this year I'm filling in actually on principal because our guy is taking some time off. So
Very cool. That's awesome.
yeah,
Well, every time I talk about tone woods, people lose their mind. They love the topic. You threw
it's
something on
cool.
Instagram a while ago where you replaced the barrel. That's what that's called, right? Below the mouthpiece is
Yeah,
the barrel. Yeah, I haven't touched a clarinet since fifth grade, so yeah.
but
But you
you're a
replaced
singer,
the, yes,
right?
yeah, piano
Okay.
singer,
Yeah.
conducting person, mostly
Oh,
choral.
cool. Oh,
But the
conducting. Oh, now I don't like you.
well, yeah,
Just kidding.
I have a vocal performance degree, and I dabbled in conducting at a master's
Cool.
level. That
Yeah, yeah.
obviously took me real far. But anyway, you replaced the barrel with a walnut barrel,
Hmm.
and played 7, 8 notes or whatever. And to me, it sounded like any clarinet I've ever heard before from a just a
Hmm.
tonality perspective. But the barrel is kind of key in a clarinet for adjusting the tonality. If I understand this right, a longer,
I'm not
shorter
quite
barrel
sure, to be
can
honest.
it
Mostly
just
the
increases the
pitch.
air column right below the reed. It
True.
changes the size of that air column, so it's changing your pitch, I think. But just changing that to walnut, and this is where I don't know, would that significantly change the tone? Because you still have the upper and lower barrel, and I mean the bell's not really doing anything as far as tonality, I don't think.
Or it kind of does. I don't have all the. I'm not an expert on it, but I think it does. Um,
Okay.
I mean, my few takeaways are. I mean, so like, again, people can listen to Shannon's Tonewood episode, and to learn about the different issues. Right, with woodwinds, you have an air column, and the main problem is. So
Humidity.
yeah, so the first thing is the walnut sounded good. Like it worked just fine. The pitch was exactly the same because the person Tony Park with Park Woodwinds, I sent him blanks, and he made it to the same length as my barrel on my Selmer clarinet, and the pitch is spot on. So there's no difference there, which is very important because if it's like, wow, that's really sharp, I can't use that, or wow, that's really flat, not going to work. So that is exactly the same. As far as the tone, there's a slight difference, yeah, and the feel is slight different. But I'm just amazed that it just works. Like there's no like, oh, that's terrible, or oh, that's never going to work. There's some issues in that the wood is not as or it's still too porous. I feel like for this, because what happens is as you play for 5-10 minutes on a walnut barrel that has a bore that's not sealed up enough, is it gets kind of hairy in there, like the grain raises, right? We're
Yeah.
used to that. You raise the grain of your cutting board before you do your final sand with water. That's what happens inside the bore
Yeah.
of, but not with the African blackwood. It gets hairy, and that interrupts your air column, and it
Yeah.
feels awful. It feels like
Yeah, I'll
something's
bet.
starting to not seal. It feels like, oh, I have a crack. In the but the tone is different, and it's interesting. And I sent him some Applewood blanks. He hasn't made anything yet, but I just was trying to get something that's super smooth, right? So the bore is not getting any interruption of the air column, and then at that point I feel like and as long as it also has to be dimensionally stable enough so that it doesn't move around too much after you introduce all that warm
Right.
moisture air, which fruit wood is not exactly stable stuff.
Yeah, that's some pretty
But
dynamic stuff. I wonder
Yeah.
if there is. My laptop is sitting on it here. Let's move this out of the way. I wonder if thermally modified products might have a home here from a dimensional stability, but also from a just water resistance, which is why they're
Right.
dimensionally stable. As you introduced a moist, warm air column inside that, that happens to be ash, which, as we know, is very porous. But
Right. It's like, no.
there's no bonding sites for water anymore in it. All
Right.
those sites are.
But does it affect vibration as far as like that's the other thing about
well,
it, right?
at its core value, tone wood, density and hardness kind of play into that. It's hard, but being ring porous, it's got a high density, but not a uniform density.
Sure.
So you may have some, again, fuzziness, if not in the pitch, but certainly in the feel. I'm trying to remember, like student clarinets, I feel like were made out of maple, with a coat of black lacquer over top of it. I can't imagine some of those student clarinets were, nice rosewoods or blackwoods or something like that. I feel like domestics must be used
plastic,
somewhere.
I mean, mostly.
Oh yeah, maybe that's it. Again, 5th grade. So and
No,
5th grade was so long ago that
maple.
they were probably still using.
Well, bassoon that's maple, by the way. Bassoons. So yeah, that's why I was just sort of like, well, why do we have to use, like you said, African blackwood, cocobolo, rosewood? Like, why? There's a, like, I mean, yeah, they're dense and they're massive trees with no defects. Great, It's like, it's just cut a few pieces off, you have fantastic blanks. But
well, and if that particular forestry does nothing but service, the woodwind world, we'll probably be okay. And I think,
right, exactly.
The amount of clarinets you can get out of a blackwood log is pretty high, and the clarinet turnover rate is probably not that. I don't know. I have no idea. I just can't imagine, the demand for clarinet blanks is going to be as high as the demand for, molding blanks.
Crown molding, right?
That I see. So, but I mean, certainly there has been decades and decades and decades of irresponsible forestry practice before anybody paid attention to it, which is why we're in this situation now. But I just think in general, like instruments and woodwinds, all the idiophones, they've been so exotic for so long. It's all dark rosewoods.
Right.
And I just wonder, it was just interesting. You had that post, and I know that was just a kind of a one-off thing, but it's like there must be people trying it, right? Like,
well, the thing is also like with changing the barrels, the quickest, easiest thing, because you don't need a wide blank like the bell. You need 3.5 inch dry wood, which is a challenge for any. But the barrel, this tiny 1.5 by 3 inch blank, and you don't have to drill any tone holes, right? Like there's no
right.
Whereas the other body pieces are, you need to actually know much more what you're doing. Whereas a barrel, it would be the simplest first thing to try. Is my point that because it's a small piece, it's not wide like the bell, and you don't have to do anything but make a barrel, right? The bore and the tape. Yeah.
Well, you think about it, all the tone holes. I mean, that's just exposing more end grain to suck up more moisture. It's fascinating. Anyway, has really nothing to do with anything we've talked about, but it adds a little bit of color to who you are.
Sure.
Sawyer and Kenny G by day. Sorry, I apologize for that already.
Hey, look. I mean, he's fantastic at. I mean, like I'm. Nobody knows who I am. We all know who Kenny G is.
They might now. So many people listen to the show. You never know. Anyway,
I'm gonna tell them.
Well, we hit this real quick, but here's your website, windwoodmilling.com. I did double check. It is Windwood. Oh, no, I've already forgotten. _ LLC, I think. Okay. Well, you were at the top of my Instagram feed here, but you know how Instagram works. It disappears just as fast. Yeah. Windwood. Dang it. It went away. Let's get this right.
I don't know.
I don't know my own. Windwood _ LLC is the Instagram handle. It's worth checking out because you post some good stuff on there, and I'm curious to see just how things evolve over the coming year or so. I will post
about the whole financial thing. As far as like this year, I'll see, and then I like to be honest about it. I don't know why. I don't know. I mean, people seem to be interested, so I share about it. So there you go.
Sure. I really appreciate it. And
Yeah.
if nothing else, I appreciate your time. It's always interesting to talk to another Sawyer and kind of get some honest look into the business, because there's a lot of people who want into the business. There's a lot of people in the business, and you've obviously gained a fair a bit of success in just collaborating with your neighborhood
Collaborate.
Sawyers, and
Be
it's good
with
stuff.
people and saw good stuff. Don't
Yeah.
sell bad stuff.
Right. There is still a firewood market.
That's my advice. Saw
That's good
things
advice.
people want, no defects. Forget it. Get them out. Get them.
Buy low, sell high. Saw things people want. There we go. There's our advice
Yes.
for the generation. It's good stuff. Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate your time.
Likewise. Thank you for having me.